All right. So I missed you last week. I did have a week off. We're going to today follow our Do This Now series. So you might remember that this started, just about a month and a half ago now. I did a video that was titled, You're 55, Do This Now. And that got a lot of attention. So I broke it down, not just 55, but 5 years from retirement, 2 years from retirement. And now this week is 1 year left to your projected retirement. What should you be doing now? So we're going to go through that in our financial focus. There are definitely things you should be focusing on for that last year of retirement. Then so that's going to be the last part of the webinar. First, we're going to start with our slot reports, and I have an update, finalized regulation that came out from the IRS last week, or the 18th it was. So I guess it was just about 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to review that, and we're going to have more information as that unfolds. It's a 200 and some page document, so it takes a little bit to go through it, and there'll be questions for sure. About the regulations, but I'm going to bring you the most, one of the most pressing points for most people today. We're going to talk about the markets, and then we're going to have our financial focus. So I want to remind you about the goals I have for you as listeners to this webinar or this podcast. So I'm going to try to remember, and I got to leave myself a note here to talk more about. I do a lot of whiteboarding, as you know, if you've been following me. So that's not really conducive to seeing what's going on when you're listening on a podcast. But the podcast is really exciting, and it's called Not a Guru. It can be found on any of your podcast services. So, give us a follow on that. I painstakingly had to listen to a couple of them as I was driving, and the material's not painstaking. I don't mean it that way, but if you ever had to sit and listen to yourself talk, I think you know what that's about. And everybody's the most critical. But my wife was with me, so she wonderfully gave me some positive feedback. But I would love it if you followed us on the podcast and shared that with your friends. But I want to share with you the goals we have for these YouTube videos or these or the podcast. This is about education, right? It's not about personalized advice. You hear me talk about that over and over again. You should not be receiving personalized advice from anybody on a podcast or YouTube or wherever you're finding your advice. This is general education, and I hope it's good education for you. But everything is very specific. I talk about your financial plan. I talk about your investment strategies. You should find the team that works for you. And if you do it yourself and you're able to do it yourself effectively, that's fine too. But there is a process for identifying your needs, goals, and issues, and you should follow those processes. And if you stay with me, I'll teach you what they are along the way, and you can decide whether you're going to try to do it yourself or find the right person for you. And maybe that right person is the Attleboro Wealth Management team. I don't know. I'm happy to explore that with you, but I want you to set yourself up to be in a good situation when your retirement does come along, or whatever time frame that is. But I want you to be inspired to make changes. Change is important. We've been given a lot of bad information over the years, maybe over the last 30 or 40 years you've been working, and people are starting to see that now, and things need to be done differently. And we talk about those different things that need to be done, but I want you to be inspired to make changes. I want you to open your mind to different ideas and different ways of thinking about planning and investing. You've got to open your mind to these things. I see this often where people, they are inspired to make changes, and they come in and, whether it's across from the table or across from the camera, and they say, okay, I want to do this. And then when it comes time to implement strategies, because it's different and because it may be uncomfortable, they sometimes shut down. And you don't want to do that. Open your mind to these different ideas and different ways of thinking about planning and investing. It's important to really protect yourself against some of the things that we potentially have coming. Stay educated so you feel confident in the plan and strategies that are put into place. Listen to the podcasts, listen to the webinars, pay attention to the webinars. We make it really easy for you. So here we are, we're at just after 10 o'clock on Wednesday, and I hear it all the time. I can't listen to your webinar live because I'm working, or I have pickleball, or I've got, some other kind of activity that I love and enjoy. And that's okay, because I make it really easy for you. So if you're a subscriber, you're going to get a notification when the video is live. And then actually, the secret is you can access it until we drop the recording. So we take it and bundle it up and then give you a recording of it, and we send that to you as well in an email format, and then you're also notified if you're a subscriber. So let me just say, if you're not a subscriber, subscribe. If you like the video, also give us a like, and if you hit the notification button, you're always going to be notified when videos come out. So that's a way to stay educated and stay updated, so you can make adjustments along the way. So they're my goals for you folks. So let's talk about I shared with you when we were speaking about podcasts, I shared with you during our last webinar that I had recorded the podcast with Dave McKnight. And it's kind of funny because at the end of the podcast, he said, well, thanks for having me on your show. And I said, well, I thought I was on your show. So it was kind of just Dave and I bantering back and forth. And you can either catch it on our podcast, or it's not there yet. I'll let you know, because it's going to be 4 or 5 segments. We talked for over an hour. Or you can find it on the Power Zero podcast. And if you don't listen to the Power Zero podcast now, you should. I'll just give a little plug for Dave on that. All right, let's talk a little bit about headlines. So one of the big headlines today was the ADP came out and said the private payroll growth slowed to 122,000 jobs in July, less than expected. So what was expected was 150,000 jobs. So the importance of that is, everybody's focused on what the Fed's going to do with our interest rates, and if they're going to cut in September or anytime soon. Where there's a Fed meeting today, could they say we're cutting rates today? Sure, they could. It's probable they won't, but we are becoming more and more confident that that's going to happen in September, and this is another level of confidence for that. Wages for those who stayed in their jobs increased 4.8% from a year ago. That's the smallest increase since July of 2021. So we're seeing the amount of jobs available come down, or people that are, the private payrolls. And we're also seeing the large increases that we saw over the past few years also come down. So that's good news from a stabilization point of view. All right, we're now going to share the Slott Report, and I'm going to share my screen so you can follow along with me. So this comes from Sarah Brenner, who's the Director of Retirement Education. And the title is IRS Issues Final Secure Act Regulations, Controversial Annual RMD Requirements During 10-Year Rule Stands. So there's been a lot of conversation about this. I had a conversation with a CPA, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, who said, I don't see where it says that someone has to take a required minimum distribution during the 10-year period. But these were proposed regulations from the IRS, and it was really, really clear. So it was the final proposed regulation was clear, saying that a person had to take their required minimum distributions during that 10-year period for an inherited IRA if the person who originally owned the IRA had passed their what's referred to as the required beginning date. That's April 1st of the year following the year that you reach age 73 now. It used to be 71, and it was 71 and a half, then it was 70 and a half. Then it was 72, then it was 73, and within 10 years it'll be 75. But that is the trigger date, right? Your current age now, today, it's the trigger date age is 73, but you don't have to take that first RMD until April 1st of the year following that year for the first time. Now, if you've passed that required beginning date and you pass away and you leave somebody an IRA, the current rule says you've got to take the person who inherits that IRA, in most cases, has to take a required minimum distribution along the way. So that was a proposed rule, and the IRS messed it up so bad. They gave us such conflicting information that they proposed this this rule and then waived the requirement for, I guess it was 3 tax years. I think it was 21, 22, 23, and 24. So that's 4 tax years. And then you're going to have to start taking those RMDs. It's going to come into effect in 2025. So let me read the final Secure Act regulation, this part of it, from Sarah Brenner. So on July 18th, 2024, the IRS issued final required minimum distribution regulations under the 2020 Secure Act. The newly issued regulations fine-tune existing rules for trust beneficiaries and aggregation of RMDs. They also eliminate burdensome rules for certain spouse beneficiaries and documentation requirements for certain IRA beneficiaries. So let me just pause there. And if you are listening on the podcast, what I'm doing is I'm sharing my screen so that people can read these Slott reports along with me. So that was a recommendation from one of our clients, Kathy, several years ago, and it was a great recommendation. So it makes these complex things that you're listening to maybe a little easier to follow. So if you want to hear this again, you can listen to it again on the podcast, or you can go to our YouTube channel and you can read it along with me. All right, so they also eliminate burdensome rules for certain spouse beneficiaries and documentation requirements for certain IRA beneficiaries. However, the 260 pages of final regulations, I'm scrolling up here, keep the majority of the 2022 proposed regulations intact. That's what I was just talking about, that proposed regulations that we've been operating under, including one provision that has generated a lot of uncertainty or a lot of controversy. The IRS is standing firm in maintaining the requirement that some beneficiaries must take annual RMDs during the Secure Act's 10-year payout period. When the Secure Act became law in 2020, most non-spouse beneficiaries lost the ability to stretch payments over their lifetime. Instead, these beneficiaries became subject to a 10-year payout rule. In the wake of the Secure Act, the IRS proposed regulations took the controversial position that if the account holder died on or after his or her required beginning date for taking RMDs, then the annual RMD payments must continue to the beneficiary during the 10-year period. The IRS based its interpretation on a long-standing provision in the tax code, often referred to as the at least as rapidly rule. This rule requires annual RMDs to continue once they have started. Many believe this rule went away with the Secure Act, but apparently the IRS thought differently. Due to all the confusion its interpretation caused, the IRS waived RMDs for inherited IRAs. So the IRS waived RMDs during the 10-year period for beneficiaries for those years 2021, 2022, 23, and 24. So I wanted to clarify that because not only have these regulations made it difficult and challenging to understand for folks with inherited IRAs, but when headlines get out there and false experts on YouTube and other channels say, hey, the IRS has waived the penalty for RMDs for certain individuals, people think their RMD was waived. And if it is the RMD on your own IRA, if it's a spousal rollover IRA, there are certain areas where these rules, these waivers didn't apply for those years. So if you were under the impression that your own RMDs, the requirements were waived for 2021, 2022, 23, and 24, let's fix that really soon, because this only applies to inherited IRAs for certain individuals. And if that makes required minimum distribution rules more complex, you might think, you're absolutely right. So in the newly released final regulations, the IRS is doubling down on its position that these annual RMDs are required. They must be taken starting in 2025. However, the IRS will not impose penalties for annual RMDs that were not taken for years 2024. So if the IRS isn't going to penalize you, that's really a waiver of the requirement up until 2025. So Sarah gives us an example. Karen inherited a traditional IRA from her mother, Linda, who died at age 85 in 2020. Under the Secure Act, Karen is subject to the 10-year rule. She must empty the inherited IRA account by December 31st, 2030. The new IRS final regulations also require her to take annual RMDs based on her life expectancy, Karen's life expectancy, based on her life expectancy in years 1 through 9 of the 10-year payout period. Due to the IRS waiver of the penalties for missed RMDs in years 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024, Karen does not need to take RMDs for those years. However, beginning in 2025, she must take an annual RMD for years 2025 through 2029 from the inherited IRA. We'll have more about these new regulations in the future. So Sarah also answers the Slott Report mailbag. So this is when people write in questions to the Slott group, and we get really great answers. Roth IRA rollovers and required minimum distributions. Today's Slott Report mailbag, again by Sarah. So the question is, can a Roth IRA be rolled into a Roth 401k? That's a really good question. We know that if the plan allows it, you can roll a traditional IRA into a traditional 401k, but can we do that same thing with a Roth? So Sarah's answer is, while Roth 401k can be rolled into a Roth IRA, the reverse is not true. So the answer is no. You cannot roll a Roth IRA into a Roth 401k. The only place where funds from a Roth IRA can be rolled over to is another Roth IRA. So you may have or may not have known that. Here's another question. I turn age 73 in October 2024. Do I have to wait until my birthday in October to take my required minimum distribution for the year? Or does any withdrawal I take in 2024 count towards the RMD? This is a really good question and one that we get all the time. Do you have to wait until you turn 73 to take your RMD? The answer is, hi, this person's name is Liliana. The answer is, hi, Liliana. If you reach age 73 in 2024, any distribution that you take from your IRA this year will count as your RMD. You do not have to wait until after your 73rd birthday to satisfy your RMD for the year. All right, let's talk about the markets. So the markets were rallied at the end of the week last week, but still closed mostly down. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed just up 0.77%, still up almost 9% for the year, 8.84%. The S&P 500 was down 0.82%, but solidly up 15.35%. The NASDAQ was also down 2.08% and up 16% still for the year. The MSCI World Index, so that's large companies around the globe, not including the U.S., was down 0.87%, still up 6.75%. Emerging markets were down 1.56%, still up for the year 6.74%. Europe, Asia, and the Far East was down 0.95%, still up almost 7% for the year, 6.89%. Global small caps still positive for the year, 7.19%. Up last week, 1.05. Most of that coming just recently. The bond markets are still holding on to a slight increase for the year, 0.76% for the year, and they increased 0.27%. So when I say the bond markets, I'm talking about the U.S. Aggregate Bond Index, and that is where most people have their money in that 7 to 9 year duration. The 1 to 3 year maturity or duration period was up 0.24% for the year, but for the week, but up 2.34% for the year. And now these are week ending numbers from July 26th, so last Friday. So Fed funds target closed at 5.50% on July 26th. The prior week was 5.50%. The year end was 5.50%, and 1 year ago it was also 5.50%. So hopefully we see a drop in that soon, but that's a general look at the markets. Now let's see what our analysts have to say about some of the stuff that's going on. So existing home sales last week. So this is the week from 7/22 to 7/26. Sales of previously owned homes fell 5.4% month over month and year over year, slightly below the expected drop, but rose to a record high. But prices rose, to a record high of $426,900. Although those numbers are not adjusted for inflation, there were 1.32 million homes for sale at the end of June, up 23.4% year over year, and at the current sales pace, there was 4.1 months supply of homes on the market, the highest level since May of 2020. So more inventory we're seeing. Housing has been a thorn in the inflation fighting side of the Fed, but we're starting to see inventory increases, which should help to moderate price gains. And also, that's what our analysts wrote, and also help give some support to the Fed, the idea of the Fed cutting rates in September. So durable goods orders. So durable goods is a measure of orders of goods for goods meant to last more than 3 years. The report is often viewed as a proxy for business confidence. Orders for goods meant to last more than 3 years dropped a surprising 6.6% month over month versus an expected gain of 0.3% and was the largest drop since April of 2020. I want you to think about that one for a second. So there is an expected gain of 0.3% month over month. So from the previous month to this month, there was a drop of 6.6%. And we haven't seen that since April 2020. Think about where we were in April 2020. So I hope that, this isn't kind of a precursor to, some troubling economic times. I'm very hopeful for this soft landing that people have been talking about. When we have uncertainty around investments, how our investments are going to perform, my foundation: asset allocation, principal protection, and account segmentation. These three methods help balance our investment needs with our financial plan, so that we really don't have to worry as much about these short-term issues. You see something like durable goods orders dropping at the same rate as they did during the early stages of the pandemic. Well, that can be a little frightening. So what does that mean? What happens if the Fed does cut in September, and if it's too early or if it's too late? So we want to set up your investment foundation, asset allocation, principal protection, and account segmentation, so that you get the things you need over the length of your lifetime, but you're not as subjected to these short-term swings. We also had the personal consumption expenditure inflation reading, or the PCE report, and that's the Fed's key report that they want to follow when they're determining whether they want to keep rates the same, increase rates, decrease rates, etc. So core PCE, which excludes food and energy, is the measure used by the Fed for the 2% target. The Fed-favored measure of inflation rose 2.6% year over year, slightly above the expected 2.5%, while the core PCE stayed at the 2.6% year over year level reported in May, which was also a tick above estimates. So it's slightly above estimates, but the feeling is that it's not going to, when you go from 2.5 to 2.6, we don't think, or the analyst doesn't think that it's going to have an effect on what the decision is for September. So how about this week? So today we have the Fed meeting. So the Federal Reserve will announce its interest rate decision, and although no change is expected, the chairman's press conference will certainly garner a lot of interest. Tomorrow we have ISM manufacturing. So the manufacturing sector has been stuck in neutral, and investors will be looking for evidence of a move one way or the other. That's going to be interesting to see. And then Friday we have the labor report. And I talked about the individual markets. Okay, so let's move into our financial focus. So this is the financial focus portion of this webinar. And in this last segment, where we focus on financial planning strategies. And this week, we're going to focus on what you should be doing 1 year from retirement. So I'm going to share my whiteboard with you, and we're going to go through what those issues are. And really, I'm going to talk about some of our previous videos. I want you to go back and look at those videos, because I can't repeat all of the foundational things that we talked about in the 5 years out video, the 2 year out video, and now here we are 1 year away from retirement. And I even have a video that says 55 years old, what you should be doing now. But it's not always, everybody's different. It's not always based on age. But let's go to the whiteboard here, and I'm sharing my whiteboard, and you're going to see a lot of drawings already, because I've carried this whiteboard over from previous weeks and added to it, because this is an add-on series. We are now at 1 year from retirement. Do this now. And the first thing I want you to do is go back and watch the previous videos. If you're just joining us for the first time, if you're listening on the podcast or if you're watching on YouTube, and you haven't already watched 55 years old, do this now. 5 years from retirement, do this now, or 2 years from retirement, do this now. Go back and watch those. Because there are some foundational things there that you're going to want to do if you haven't done them already. But use it. You can also use it as a checklist to say, oh, you know what? I've done that. I've done that. Let me check that off. And I do those things as I go along here. But you certainly want to have that resource. And you can use this whiteboard here. If you're just listening on the podcast, you can't. But you can go to the YouTube channel and watch. And you can use this as your own checklist here. But first thing, go back and watch those previous videos, and we'll put those videos in the description here so it's easy for you. So you want to start or continue to pay attention to details, your expenses, your investments, your contributions. This might be this very well may be your last year of contributions to your retirement plans. And I recently met with somebody who was a year from retirement. And they said, should we be doing this now? Should we, we're only 1 year away. And, they had a Roth 401k option. And I said, well, you're over 50 years old. You have an opportunity to put $30,500. That's today. That's in 2024. $30,500 into your Roth 401k. You're never going to have that opportunity again to get that money over to the Roth via contribution. Why not take advantage of it if you have the money? And they said, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. And they're very smart people, too. And so it doesn't matter, your level of intelligence doesn't matter. It's sometimes looking at things from a separation point of view. We're able to sit back and objectively look at things. And it's also just experience. We do these things every day, all day long. So contributions, tax category. Where does your money lie in what bucket? So I'm sliding over here to the right. Your taxable bucket, your tax deferred bucket, your tax advantage bucket. Where does your money sit? Most of folks have most of their money in this tax deferred bucket I'm drawing on the screen here. And that is, you're sitting on the middle of the train tracks just waiting for that tax train to hit you. And there's going to be a point when you're going to have no control over that. And we just spent a lot of time talking about required minimum distributions in the full section of full portion of this webinar. You can go back and listen to that if you'd like. But you got to make sure that you understand where your investments sit in the tax categories and what the benefits and risks are in each one of those categories. You want to work with your team. Put that team together if you don't already have it. But rely. One of the bullet points I have for the 1 year is rely on your team. Trust your team and rely on your team. If you've done a good job putting your team together, trust your team and rely on that team. If you haven't done a good job putting your team together, either do it or change. So take advantage of your team, your CFP, your certified financial planner, your tax-focused certified financial planner, your CPA on that team, your attorney or attorneys on your team. Here's the diagram for that. They should be qualified, experienced, proficient, and they all should be working for you. All right. You want to go through and review your financial plan. If you don't have a financial plan and you're 1 year from retirement, hear the klaxon going off. Hear that going off. You have to do this now. Do this now! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! If you haven't developed a truly comprehensive financial plan, do this now before you do anything else. Before you even plan your next vacation, do that now. Financial planning is where you identify your needs, issues, and objectives. And it's really important to do a truly comprehensive plan. I shared with you in one of the previous videos, and I'll say it again. I had a fellow come to us and say, hey, I want you to look at my stuff and give me your opinion. And he shared a financial plan, air quote, financial plan that somebody had done for him. And it was a multi-page document. I think it was over 100 pages or very, very close to that. It said nothing. It was a nice inventory of his investments and what he wanted to do, but it really said nothing. You want a truly comprehensive financial plan. So, and then we talked about from 5 years to retirement. If you're 60 years old and you're 5 years from retirement, you start looking at Social Security option, maximizing benefits, your cash flow, your tax, Roth conversions. And we talked a lot about account segmentation in that 5 years from retirement video. And this is the diagram, and I know this looks crazy, but this is the diagram for account segmentation. And this simply lays out how your investment portfolio should be driven by the time that you're going to need them in your retirement. And you can only identify the amount of money and how they should be invested through proper financial planning. So this helps eliminate the worry early in retirement and helps you have the growth you need for later in retirement. This is a very challenging process. Very few investment managers, financial advisors, financial planners, whatever you want to call them, very few people do this because it's a tremendous amount of work. But it is really the bedrock of that core foundation of asset allocation, principal protection, and account segmentation. So go back and review that in more detail. I'm trying hard not to get into it again, but it's one of my favorite topics, right? Account segmentation. In 2 years from retirement, we talked about, depending on your age, start planning your Social Security claiming strategies. And we're going to touch on that again. Social Security is very important. You really get a very short window to do a do-over with Social Security. Don't listen to people on YouTube. Not even me. Don't listen to me on YouTube about your Social Security strategy because it's different. You can learn. You can take the education. I don't think I said it at the top of this segment, but this is about education. This isn't about personal advice. Your personal advice should be driven by your needs, goals, and issues. And there are really great tools and good people out there that can help you with these things, but it should be personalized. So don't take your Social Security advice from anybody on YouTube. Promise me that, if nothing else. Don't take it from your brother, uncle, cousin, friend, plumber, whomever, hairdresser, whomever they are, if they're not qualified to give you that advice. My uncle took Social Security at 62, so that seems like the right thing for me to do. That's probably not the way you want to make a lifelong decision. That's going to affect you and perhaps your spouse if you have a spouse. Depending on your age, consider healthcare costs, your premiums, your IRMA, or income-related monthly adjustment amounts. Again, I'm recapping from so if it feels like I'm going quickly, I'm recapping. Zero in on goals, needs, and objectives. Get clear. I need to check these off. Get clear about your expenses, living expenses. This was 2 years from retirement. Get clear about those living expenses. So it's aspirational expenses. Pay attention to taxes. Too many people who do what I do, or what we do here as a team, say we don't give tax advice. Well, folks, taxes are going to be one of your largest expenses in your retirement. You need somebody who's going to give you tax advice, who's going to identify that large expenditure and what it could be in the future. Pay attention to those taxes. Don't let somebody say, well, that's not what we do. Let your CPA talk about that, because most CPAs aren't planners. Focus on segment 1 and 2 of your investment strategy. So these are the first 6 to 7 years of your investments. Where is that money coming from, and how are you going to stabilize it just in case or when the markets get crazy? We're overdue. We're overdue for an adjustment. We're overdue for a recession. So at some point, folks, it can't always be a bowl of cherries. At some point, markets are going to get difficult. We saw it in 2022, but most of you are forgetting, I think, already. Ensure your beneficiaries are correct and up to date. Review your financial plan, your cash flow, your goals, needs, and objectives. Your potential issues, tax planning, Roth conversions. Is life insurance part of your plan? As you get older, life insurance gets more expensive. It doesn't mean that it is eliminated from your plan, but does it make sense that equal health situations at 60, it's less? It costs less to get life insurance than it does at age 65. And life insurance can be a good planning tool for retirement. It's not just all about your estate plan. It's not just all about protecting your income. There are other reasons that you may want to use life insurance in your plan. So figure out if that is going to be part of it, and figure that out as early as possible. Long-term care coverage. You've got a greater than 70% chance of needing long-term care during your retirement. So that's a big opportunity. If I told you had, you walk out of here and you get a 70% chance of finding $5,000 in my parking lot, there'd be a bunch of people out here in my parking lot. So you've got a 70% greater, or a little over 70% chance of needing long-term care during your retirement. And let me tell you a secret. It's not really a secret. Long-term care, the care is expensive. We often see $10,000, $12,000 a month of expenditures. Of course, your investment strategy and your estate plan. So review all those. And I talk about those in depth in each one of the videos. Okay, so here we are. 1 year from retirement focus. Now you've gone through and you've identified your expenses. So this is area 1 where most people fail when they're doing their financial plan, and where most financial planners fail. I've shared with you that I'm fortunate where I have the opportunity to coach financial planners and financial advisors around the country from time to time. And what I find is that when we talk about their financial planning process, I say, how do you identify expenses that your clients may have? And they say, well, they tell me. So they'll come in and they say, I need to spend $10,000 a month in retirement. And I have to tell you, most of the time that number is wrong. Even the most detailed individual who says, I've been tracking a spreadsheet over the last 35 years, I know exactly what my expenditures are. Most times we find a difference somewhere. So the first thing is truly identify your expenses. Go through the work to identify those expenses. We have a spreadsheet that we use for our clients. I don't like to call it budgeting. It's really more about cash flow. But you've got to have a process for identifying those expenses. And then once you get clear on your expenses, test drive them. So if your number truly is $10,000 a month and you make $20,000 a month in your job, now live off of the 10 for the next year to see what it really is and track them closely. So test drive those, because isn't it easier to make adjustments before retirement? Because you might say, well, geez, this is a little tighter than I thought it was. Maybe I should extend my retirement a couple of years or a year or two, or make adjustments. So it's much easier to do that before retirement or early in retirement than, of course, than it is later. And you find out, well, holy cow, I spent too much in my first 5 years. Know where your paychecks are coming from. So when you retire, you no longer actually get a paycheck. But you want to know where your cash flow is coming from. So one of the things that I hear from people all the time is, I need to know how it's going to work, where the money's coming from. I'm used to earning money. I spend some, I save some. I have all this saved and put together. Now I need to see how it's coming out and how it's being paid. That goes back to the account segmentation, from your investments. You want to be able to segment your investment portfolio so you know exactly where your money's coming from and exactly how they're going to react in different market conditions. Those individual accounts, those individual segmented accounts, they can't all be blended together. Any annuity payments you have. So you might have annuities in place. When are they going to pay, and what is the projected amount that they're going to pay, and what's the tax category of those annuities, and does something need to change with that? So annuity payments, in the tax category of those annuity payments. Social Security. I mentioned in the recap, don't take Social Security advice from anybody than a qualified Social Security expert. Folks, Social Security is so complex. I've shared with you before that we brought an expert onto our team, Heather Shriver. She's one of the top Social Security planning experts in the country, because it is a really important decision. So don't take it lightly. Don't take it from somebody who isn't qualified, whether it's somebody on YouTube, a podcast you listen to, your uncle, brother, cousin, friend, whomever. Don't make that decision based on anything other than qualified recommendations. And there's a lot of considerations, not just how much you get out of your Social Security Administration or the Social Security Administration. There's also cash flow. There's taxes. There are a lot of considerations. Some people want to wait till age 70. Some people want to take it as early as possible. And there's every available option in between. All right, so we talked about test drive your expenses, know where your paychecks are coming from. We talked about investments and account segmentation, annuity payments, Social Security, pension. You may have a pension. And we're going to talk about pension strategy here in a second, but let's talk about it now. So if you have a pension, there are many options. You can have a single life payout. So that typically means that that's typically the largest amount that you're going to get from your pension. And if you die, well, too bad. The company keeps the rest of it. There could be a joint life option if you're married. There could be, and that could vary. There could be a 100% option, a 75% option, a 50% option. And that just means that's what your spouse receives if you pass away. 100% of the benefit, 75% of the benefit, 50% of the benefit, and every pension is different. So these are just examples I'm giving you. There could also be what are called period certain options. And you'll see things like 10-year, 20-year. I don't think you're seeing 30-year anymore. But what that means is that you'll receive, and that reduces your pension benefit as well. And a joint life will typically reduce your pension benefit as well, the amount of money that you get every month to make up for the risk, right, that the pension has of paying this for a longer period of time. The reason that the single life option is it gives you the most money during a shorter period of time, or potentially shorter period of time, is that there's less risk that they're going to be paying you for a long time. When you add another life or a period certain, it's likely that the pension is going to pay out to somebody for a longer period of time. That's why they reduce the amount that you receive initially and every month. The period certain options are, okay, if you pass away in the first 10 years, somebody's going to receive that benefit for the remaining amount. So if you pass in year 8, there's 2 years left of payments if you choose the 10-year option. If you pass in year 8 and you have the 20-year option, well, there's 12 months or 12 years left of payments. Pretty simple when you think about it, but all of these options can be confusing. And how do you think you figure out what's best for you? Well, you work it out in your plan, your financial plan, your truly comprehensive, truly thorough financial plan. So work it out in your plan. A lot of what if scenarios. And then you could have other income. So you might have, there could be rental income. There could be business income. You could have a business that maybe you're retiring from your full-time job. I was talking to a couple. They were both retiring, but they had a lot of investment properties, and they're retiring from their full-time job, but they're going to keep working in their investments, the real estate investments. So they've got another job. You might have a part-time job that you want to do. You might have real estate rental income. You might have other income. People hold notes for other people. There could be just so many different things, but get all those things together and understand when payments start, if they increase or have the potential for increase, when they potentially stop. You want to really have a handle on that. You want to be very sure when you're going into retirement. You're only 1 year away at this point. And then review these things. You're going to be, wow, I really typed that weird. You're going to be busier than you think. Retirees are the busiest people I know. If you're listening to this and you're retired, just nod your head with me because it's so much harder to get retired people on the calendar than it is a working person. You're going to be busier than you think. You've got to review your financial plan every year. Along with that, we're going to look at your legal and estate documents. I say we, our team. If you're working with us, we review those as well. And your beneficiary designations. Review it now because you might say to yourself, well, geez, if I'm retiring on July 31st in 2025, I'm going to have time to review those things then. It's not going to happen. You're going to want to travel. You're going to want to do these exciting things. You're going to get busy, and you're not going to review those things. And then, sometimes, people pass suddenly, things change suddenly, and you're going to get caught up in a whole other spiral of things. But hear me when I tell you, you're going to be busier than you think in retirement. So review these things now. Review your financial plan. Review your legal and estate documents. Review your beneficiary designations. The financial plan includes your needs, goals, and issues, your expenses, your cash flow, your investments, all of that. So this is a big catch-all, right? Your financial plan. But review those things now before you retire. Set aside. This is your planning year. Now, there's some age-specific things. So we're talking about 1 year from retirement. But hey, you could be 57 years old and 1 year from retirement. You could be 72 years old and 1 year from retirement, and everywhere in between and beyond. But there are age-specific things that you should be paying attention to. And the first one is Medicare. And I'm going to add to here Medicare and healthcare. Because you might be 64 years old, you're going to retire at 65, and Medicare planning is part of your checklist. Well, I've got to talk to a qualified professional about what Medicare plan I should receive. You might be 57, you're going to retire at 58, and your question is, how do I cover healthcare costs between 58 to 65? Both of those are really, really important discussions. And you're going to need qualified help for that. You can only find so much out from the internet, and you can get conflicting information, you can get bad information. So this is another area, Medicare and healthcare planning. I think you need some expert help. Social Security, we talked about that. Absolutely. This is age specific. If you're 57 years old and you're a year from retirement, I'm using 57 as an example. If you're 57 years old and you're a year from retirement, you want Social Security planning to be part of your plan, but it's not as acute. It's not something you need to do immediately. But if you're 60, if you're 64, if you're 60, if you're 61, I would start having that discussion now. How best to strategize your Social Security withdrawals. And maybe RMDs, so Social Security, maybe RMDs. What if you're 70 years old and you're going to retire at 71? There are people that work well into their 70s. Well, they're going to have RMDs coming up. And those RMDs are required minimum distributions. How's that going to affect your cash flow? How's that going to affect your tax situation? How's that going to affect Social Security? If you're choosing Social Security, well, if you're 70 years old, your choices are out. It's time to collect Social Security, right? But there is tax on your Social Security potentially, and it could be 0, 50% of your benefit, up to 50%, or up to 85% of your benefit. So how are those RMDs going to affect that Social Security? How are they going to affect your standard of living? How are they going to affect everything else? So RMDs are something that you lose control of when you reach your age, your required age, currently 73 years old, because the IRS tells you exactly how much we must take out of our IRAs and pay tax on, and you have no choice because you're going to be penalized if you don't take it. So maybe RMDs you have to worry about. How about withdrawals prior to 59 and a half? So I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he's looking at retiring early, and he won't be 59 and a half yet. And he asked a really good question when we were going through his general strategy. He said, well, where am I going to take my money from if I retire at 57? And I said, well, it can't be the IRAs. And it also shouldn't be the Roth IRAs, probably. And it technically could be the IRAs. There's a rule of 72T, in the IRS code that allows you to take equal payments over a period of time from an IRA. You still have to pay tax on it, but it alleviates the 10% penalty for an early withdrawal, because with some exceptions, any distribution from a IRA or a 401k or other retirement plan prior to 59 and a half has a 10% penalty. Now, there are some provisions that allow you to take out of certain retirement plans, age 50, age 55. But again, this is very specific. It depends on the type of job you do. It depends on the type of account you have, and it depends on the situation. But for this person I was talking to, he couldn't take money from his retirement plan without using this 72T rule. But he didn't need to, right? So he has other funds outside of the IRA. But that's really good thinking. Well, wait a minute. Where am I going to take that money from? So withdrawals prior to 59 and a half, where's that coming from? Rely on your team. We talked about building your team. If you haven't built your team already, or if you're not confident in your team, get a new team or build your team, but rely on that team. We want that team of experts helping us with these decisions. So rely on that team. Prepare for the worst parts of retirement. Illness, death. I told you got a greater than 70% chance of needing long-term care, but that's plus. But there are other illnesses. You could. What if you fall? What if you hurt yourself? Anything can happen, right? So prepare for those things. If you prepare for them, I think you worry about them less. That seems to be what my experience is. Of course, death, none of us get out of this, alive. So if you're married, one of you is going to pass before the other, very likely. You've got to understand what that's going to mean from a tax point of view, from a spending point of view, from a cash flow point of view, from a plan effectiveness point of view. Most people don't realize that. They realize it, but they don't think about it. They don't think about the repercussions of what happens financially if my spouse passes before me, or if I pass before my spouse. You get if you're both collecting Social Security, you lose one of those benefits. There could be pension loss. There's certainly tax issues. So you want to prepare for the worst parts of retirement. Illness and death and funding. There's a question mark of funding. Are you certain that you're not going to outlive your investments and your income? That's a really important question, because if your financial plan only says that you're going to make it until age 85 and you live to 95, well, even folks, if you live to 86 and you're out of money, that's a terrible last year of your life. But if you have longevity and you go to age 95 plus and you've risked running out of money at age 85, that is no good. And that is certainly one of the worst parts of retirement. So plan for those and prepare for the worst parts so you can enjoy the best parts. Our objective when we're working for folks is I want them to have a worry-free retirement. I want them to, that what we do is complex, and what we do takes a lot of time, and it is nuanced and different. I recognize that. I don't want people to worry about that. Let us worry about the details. Let us worry about the day-to-day. And we do. We spend a lot of time on those day-to-days, making sure things are running right. But I want clients just to enjoy themselves. So focus on that worry-free. Spend time with your loved ones, yourself. Sometimes it's nice just to get out by yourself if you enjoy that. Travel and adventure, particularly early in your retirement. Enjoy the best parts, including travel and adventure. Stay active, stay involved, and learn new things. One of the benefits of this business that we're in is we get to see people in these later stages of their lives. We have younger folks who are clients, but most of our clients are in their mid to late 50s and above, and heavily weighted to the above. But we see great things. We see, all kinds of adventures, travel. We get pictures from really neat, exotic places. We hear about grandchildren being born and all these exciting things. And it's wonderful to see, whether it's new houses, cars, or just great meals together, things like that. That is wonderful. And what I've seen is the folks who stay active. Do your workouts, walk, pickleball. I joke about pickleball, but cycling, Pilates, yoga, whatever it is for you, stay active, stay involved in your community, your lives, your children's lives. If you have children, stay involved, stay active, and learn new things. Learn new things. Don't be afraid to learn new things. And finally, plan your party. If you've done all of that, if you've done all of those things I've talked about, well, now you can plan your party. Get ready. Enjoy it. It's going to come. You're going to wake up and it's suddenly going to be 7/31/2025. If that's your day, a year from now, well, let's party. And if you're working with me, make sure you invite me. I give good gifts. So I hope that was helpful. Go back, look, use this as your checklist. This has been 3 or 4 videos of information. So use these as your checklist. And maybe I'll take this information and put it together in a checklist. And don't ask for it because I don't have it. But maybe I will. Maybe I'll take this information, put it in a checklist, but I don't have it yet. Somebody is going to write in and say, can I have that checklist you were talking about? Use this. If you're just listening on the podcast, go back to the YouTube video and you can track the whiteboard. Go back to the previous videos. 55 years old, do this now. 5 years from retirement, do this now. 2 years from retirement, do this now. And this video, 1 year from retirement, do this now. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was educational. It's great seeing you all again. Happy last day of July, and I'll see you all next week. Take care.